introducing the second session of this conference, which will be more or less that's the Open University, the Center for Voluntary Sector Leadership, sharing the work we've been doing over the last while, which has got some sort of collaboration element. So it will be 3 presentations broken down, maybe sort of the Q&A after each session, is it? I don't think, yeah. No. 3 presentation followed by a discussant, Steve, my colleague, and then we have a Q&A at the very end. So can I encourage people online in particular to use the Q&A function just to make sure that you are included, because we don't want to hear from the people who are in the room alone. We want everybody to contribute. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome my colleague Francesca, who is going to be talking to us about collaboration in doing research with and for communities. Over to you, Francesca.
Thank you so much, Fidèle. Good morning, everyone. I'm Francesca Calo. I'm a senior lecturer here at the Open University with CVSL. And it's a pleasure to be here today to discuss about research that, as many of my colleagues know, is one of the favorite part of my job. And specifically, I would like to share some insights from research I did with and for voluntary sector organizations, exploring various ways of collaboration. I will start to delve into why research is crucial. I will spend a few minutes about that because I think it's good to remember that research is important, and I'm going to focus on why research is important for different voluntary sector organizations. Following that, the main part of my presentations will be around 3 different collaborative research project, very different in terms of the way I collaborated with voluntary sector organization. And I will conclude by sharing some key learnings from this collaboration. But first of all, why research is important. Research is the foundation of knowledge. Many products, services, activities that shape our daily lives come and are outcomes of research. And research has transformed and continue to transform our communities. As you can see in this slide, significant milestones like antibiotics, electricity, gravity, discovering the Earth in motion and DNA have all stemmed from rigorous research. But research is also important for organization, and as well organization that are the voluntary sector ones. For example, research can help you to understand your service users and beneficiaries and how their needs are changing, but as well understanding your volunteers. It's helpful to understand the context in which operate. That could be, for example, the societal challenges, the environmental challenge, as in the picture in the slide, or the changing in policies landscape, for example, with for example, in the UK with the future election. It's also important research to understand and explore your internal processes. So to explore what it works and what it doesn't, and how you can improve your organization. And research is as well fundamental for innovation, whether it's in your services or whether it's in your product or whether it's in the relation that you have with your employers and your volunteers. There are different ways to conduct research, but I firmly believe, and I think that we firmly believe, I can say that we firmly believe at CVSL that research and collaboration should be at the core of the research with and for voluntary sector organization. So let me present 3 projects that exemplify in very different way collaboration. The first one, as you can see, the picture is a rural town up north in Scotland, 3 hours from Glasgow. So the first research is that I want to introduce. It was my PhD. My PhD focused on exploring the impact of a community-based social enterprise on the health and well-being. The social enterprise was based up in Scotland, in a rural area on the west part of Scotland. And they contacted the organization where I was working, the university where I was working and doing my PhD, because they were interested in trying to understand if it was possible to research about their impact on the communities. So they were really interested in the topic of my PhD. They were really helpful to design, and we designed together the protocol of research. So that's the collaboration. We sit together to design the protocol, how to include, for example, beneficiaries, what was the best process to include them in the research, what kind of data they had available that I could analyze. And they facilitated really the access to critical information and observation. So, I mean, one of the story I always tell about my PhD, I used to live in Glasgow. I used to collect data 3 hours from Glasgow. I don't know if you have never lived or been in Glasgow during the winter. Basically, the sunrise at 9 o'clock. I used to take the train at 5:30, crossing the main square of Glasgow, where only myself and foxes during the winter were going around. I will never forget that. It was, I mean, I've taken the first train up, taking the last train down, 3 hours travel, bringing down some fish because it's a town. But yeah, that was part, let's say, of my experience of doing a PhD. And it was great. I think the collaboration with the organization was really good, with up and down, with some challenges sometimes. And it was good because I was able to obtain my PhD in 3 years and a half. That is quite good. So I didn't stay without the funding for a long time. I was able to publish, that it was quite good. And one of the paper, you have the link of one of the paper published from my PhD in the slide. But it could have been also more successful. So for example, the organization, for different reasons, decided not to use and to capitalize on the research I did, for example, to obtaining further funding. So they were funded by the NHS. The paper I published, it was in a journal that was quite well recognized by NHS people as a very good standard journal. And they could have capitalized better and used better my research, both for improving their processes, but as well to leverage in terms of obtaining funding. On the other side, it was also difficult for me sometimes to access the data, because when you work with small community-based social enterprise, in particular, quantitative data were really fragmented. So it was difficult to conduct rigorous research in quantitative way in that kind of setting. The second project instead was my postdoc. My postdoc was a European-funded Horizon project series. You see the logo on the slides, and it was about the skills and integration of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers into the European labor market. I was part of the coordinator team, so I was both the researcher for the UK and the project manager of the project. Like every European project, the ratio behind that is providing and creating results and outcomes for policymakers, but as well for beneficiaries. So the impact of the project is quite important. Where it was the collaboration here with voluntary sector organization at two different levels. We had three non-profit organizations involved in the consortium. So they were receiving funding from the European Union for conducting the research. But they were also part, let's say, of the beneficiaries of the research and involved as well in the data collection. Based on the collaboration, I present on the slides two different outcomes of this collaboration. The first one is Work-In. So Work-In is a serious game, so an app that was created in collaboration with a nonprofit organization inside the consortium. And it's an app that in different languages present and support migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers in understanding the labor market dimension in different contexts. So it was tested in several different contexts. We had 7 different countries produced in different language. and the nonprofit organization involved in the consortium help us to test with their beneficiaries. So, for example, in a job fair in Athens, they tested the pilot with migrants arriving to the job fair in Athens and feeding back to the researchers that modify the app to address the different challenges. So this is an example, and you can download the app if you want to have a look at it on the Play Store. The other example is on the picture on the left, and if you have time and you want to watch the link, there is a link to the video. It was a flash mob organized with migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers and researchers of the university. It was organized to disseminate findings around the solidarity towards migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. It was 2017. The flash mob was done at Kelvin Grove Museum inside the Glasgow Science Festival. But what it's interesting in terms of collaboration, that was a really bottom-up approach in terms of inclusion. So what happened for something like 5 months, families of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, alongside researchers, both from social sciences and engineering, they come together every weekend to dance and to create with a teacher, a dance teacher, choreography, and to exhibit themselves at the Glasgow Kelvin Grove Museum. And what it was interesting, it was that sometimes that collaboration was challenging because we were very different people coming together on a Saturday, dancing. But on the other side, it was something that really put the researchers a bit out of their comfort zone and try to explore what kind of instruments and mechanism we could create in terms of inclusion. So this is another example of collaboration. The third one, and I'm happy here that I see one of our community researchers that is sitting. The third one is a project that we are undertaking at the moment, and that our colleague Wenjin, she cannot be here today. She is the principal investigator, and it's a project that focuses and explore the experience of mothers, of new mothers, and then the minority mothers in the labor market. So what does it happen to mothers when they have a kid under school age in terms of work? And in this project, we have involved the 5 community researchers that they collect the voices of their communities. So the collaboration became involved inside the research. And what I found really fascinating was we had 2 collaborative trainings, research training. And what is really fascinating was that it was a 2 ways and 2 direction of learning. So between the researchers involved inside the university and the community researchers, we discussed for 2 days what were the best way of collecting the data and how we could improve the protocol we put in place. And so we are still working on the research project, and we aim with this research project and with the community researcher involved to be the amplifier of the voices of mothers. And one of the outcomes, actually, at the moment, one of the outputs, let's say, at the moment of the project, we are organizing a webinar with a voluntary sector organization, Pregnant and Screwed, where we want to offer parts of the findings of the research, but as well parts of the services that are provided by voluntary sector organization for mothers. So the collaboration becomes included in all the research design and research delivery. So, and I will conclude what I learned in this 3 projects. I mean, as I said at the beginning, and I think it's very important to remind, is that research is important for all of the organization, including voluntary sector ones. It's expensive doing research, that's true, but part of the research, and if the research is designed properly, it's quite helpful to understand how to make the services better and how to address better the needs of beneficiaries. There are different ways of doing research. The 3 research projects I presented, they have very different ways of doing research, not only in terms of methodologies, but also in terms of collaboration with the organization. The first one was more a traditional research project, so a PhD student that collaborate with the research, but take a step back, collect the data, analyze, give out the analysis of that data. The second one is more a traditional, let's say, policy-oriented funded research, where you do part of the research, you create academic knowledge, but you have part of that impact also through the delivery, for example, of different ways of knowledge exchange and the different product. The third one is, let's say, a whole coordinated research project where the collaboration is really at the heart in the design and in the delivery. What is common across the 3, I think, is the role that the university should have, and all higher education institutions should act as an independent amplifier of the voices of the communities. And we should support organization and policymakers to improve services, policies, and strategies, and to help voluntary sector organization to have a bigger voice towards, for example, influencing policies and the policies that we have seen, for example, in the keynote speech this morning. And what I would like to conclude with 2 sentences. One, that we are available to work together and to do research that can be meaningful for communities. And today we will have other presentation about the kind of research we are doing and create a sustainable and long-term change. And I would like to leave you with one of the sentence from one part of one of my favorite poems that I think detail what research means, at least to me. And I hope we can embark together on a journey to Ithaca and improve the communities where we live. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Steve Parker. I'm a lecturer in management here at the Open University. Been asked to be a discussant. My colleague Nick Winchester, unfortunately, is unwell today, so I'm going to be the discussant on all 3 presentations, so I'll try not to repeat myself, so apologies if I do. I just wanted to say thanks very much, Francesca. That was fantastic, really enjoyed that. And I agree with everything. You raised some brilliant issues and insights about your experience, your wide experience. So thank you very much. My role as a discussant is really just to, I'm trying not to repeat exactly what Francesca said, just to raise some issues. And what I thought would be useful is my background is I've worked in local government for more than 20 years. So I see myself as what you might call a pracademic. So I'm always interested in, how research relates to sort of working on the ground. So I thought it might be useful for me to reflect on that a little, as well as some other issues. And one of the things that really spoke to me about Francesca's talk is that in my area, which is mainly public management, we have a lot of big theories: co-creation, public value, social value, collaboration. But yet sometimes they seem to be sort of very much applied at quite a high level. And I think academics can sometimes sort of look at some of these bigger policy areas. And I think it's really welcoming that Francesca's sort of focusing on something, which is about the sort of the individual citizen, the service user, and so on. I think that's personally where a real focus needs to be put. I mean, as a practitioner, I've seen researchers come in to my organisation, and sometimes one feels involved and sometimes one feels excluded, and that can make you question the rationale for why those researchers have come in. Is it because the top managers have some sort of strategy that they just want to change something, or is it because they're truly sort of committed to to change on the ground? So I think some of the things that Francesca mentioned there really spoke to that, about that working with communities. I mean, I'm very much a sort of a small picture person, and I was interested in what Francesca was talking about policy and real life change. And I've always personally struggled about how you link strategic outcomes and personal outcomes for individuals. And sometimes there is a real tension about that. We're trying to squash these experiences about emotions and collaboration with real people into strategies and KPIs and so on. So that focus on the smaller scale, but also the macro scale really spoke to me in Francesca's talk. I think one of the issues, I'm not saying that we can solve those issues today, but one of the things that really spoke to me about Francesca's research is about how, as a researcher, you have to be a good sort of translator. I think that you need to have skills and a bedside manner, as it were, that you're able to communicate with people at different scales, at different parts of the organisation, with communities as well as senior managers, that you don't exclude people or alienate people because of the way that you present yourself. So by doing so, that you will build a better trust and collaboration. So those were some thoughts from me about Francesca's presentation. So thanks very much, Francesca. You've raised a lot of issues for me, and I'm sure you've done so for the audience as well. Thank you.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be with you today and talk about this research project which is ongoing, and it's involved me travelling further north than Glasgow to the very lovely and beautiful country of Sweden, which I have experienced now in all its climatic diversity, from very cold to quite warm. And so I'm going to be talking to you today about the ethical and political implications of doing collaborative research. And so one of the things that has prompted this exploration is a puzzlement about what collaboration actually means in the context of research. What do we understand it to be, and how do we do it? And in starting to form relationships with my colleagues at Mälardalen University, those are the questions that we've been able to explore. And so today I'll be joined online by my colleague Linda Höglund, but I've also been working with Karen Axelsson at the university. And I suppose underlying this is a sense that we in the university need to think about what we do to support and enable collaboration in wider societal contexts, including in organisations. And as has already been said, the voluntary sector is a very important site for those collaborative relationships. So I'm very pleased to be able to have this dialogue with you. And what we have also tried to do in the best spirit of research is to find out what we already know about collaboration. So that has involved systematically looking at the research base, the literature that has been done on the meaning of collaboration and how it should be done. So why are we interested in this subject? Well, it started for me from my textbook. So I'm a co-author of a textbook on business research methods, which is now in its 6th edition. And one of the things that this affords me is the opportunity to track trends in the way we do research over time, which because I've been involved in this book for 20 years, has enabled me to see fluctuations and trends. And what I have sometimes been frustrated with is the diversity of language that is used to describe research practices that seek to develop more power equal relationships between those who are researched and those who do the research. But starting from action research, we can see a whole diversity of language that is used around that type of practice. And so I wanted to have the opportunity to explore what those meanings were. Not because I want some single definition of collaborative research that we all agree to and sign up to, because I don't think that's necessarily possible or desirable. But because I believe in the notion of shared understandings as important in social life. If we don't, as a grouping, know what it is we're trying to do and have some sort of consensus about that, then it can become problematic, I think. And we obtained funding from a Swedish funder called the Knowledge Foundation, which has enabled me over the last year to visit Mälardalen University several times and to get to know a bit more about their practices. And you'll see here a beautiful picture of the university in the winter months when it goes dark at 3 o'clock and I have to drink lots of coffee to stay awake. I'm going to pass now, though, to Linda. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see her because of the limits of the technology, but you will be able to hear her talk a little bit more about MDU's position on collaboration.
Yes, MDU positioned itself as a collaborative university in its strategy. And the question of if we should collaborate is absent. Some colleagues even joke about it and say, it is hard to be against collaboration as it is to be against democracy. It is expected from us to collaborate. The quotation on the slide shows how MDU defines collaboration, putting forth aspect of long-term mutual exchange that builds on trust, but also that collaboration is a method and not a result in itself. We often get the question why MDU is so focused on collaboration. The usual statement is that MDU is founded on collaboration, and people say that it's in the university's DNA to collaborate. This based on that when the university was founded in 1977, it fulfilled several needs in the region, and close collaboration with both the private and the public sector was quickly developed. Even though MDU was quite early in focusing on collaboration in both education and research, its political importance has increased, and collaboration is now expected by many stakeholders in the Swedish society. MDU has a wide range of collaborations with both private sector, small regional firms to large international companies as Hitachi. And the public sector, as we work a lot with, is municipalities in the region, but also with civil society and the third sector. And an example of MDU collaboration is one of our previous research projects on collaboration, where we studied how municipalities, together with stakeholders from the third sector, work towards the public value of safety. The municipality had located Årby as an unsafe residential area that was very segregated. In relation to this, a new collaboration project was started, aiming to better integrate the residents at Årby by collaborating with Sisters of Business, that is a local initiative that helps young women to establish their own businesses, but also a national non-profit association that supports study circles and education, and Årby Association that supports the residents in the area. Why the municipality decided to work with specifically these three stakeholders is not that clear. But we could see that the municipality's intention to create public value by working towards a safer environment was a great initiative, but in practice several challenges emerged. Especially aspects regarding power relations were problematic. For example, who should be accountable for what in the collaboration? And who got to decide on what is valuable? And who is going to be included in the project? The different stakeholders also tended to compete regarding the same target group of 4,000 inhabitants, while at the same time this target group was not included in the collaboration and did not get a voice in deciding upon what could be considered to create a safer environment. Overall, the collaboration project was hard to manage and control as there were several stakes and interests that needed to be negotiated. And in the end, it was hard to define value of the collaboration for each stakeholder. Yes. To enhance our understanding of the meaning and purpose of collaborative research, as Emma said, we have turned to the management literature. By selecting the papers that use the keyword collaborative research, we did a reflexive literature review of published papers within management research. What we find was that the concept mostly was used without defining it. But that collaborative research include some kind of relationship between academic researchers and external partners to create knowledge. We also found that is a lack of critical thinking regarding collaborative research in the management literature. What our practice of doing collaborative research shows us is that we need a better understanding of power relation and motives, as well as different stakes and interests of the stakeholders. But that is rarely addressed in the management literature, except for a handful of papers that quite recently has been published and acknowledge this. What we want to show with this slide is that there is an idea that management literature, that collaborative research bridging the theory and practice gap. We also want to show that there is an underlying expectation of building reciprocity where both academics and practitioners benefit from the collaboration.
Theme that we identified from our review concerns the idea of collaboration as a process, a practice, a method. And this is where we get a wide range of terms being used, sometimes interchangeably in the same piece of work. So you may find engaged scholarship, knowledge co-production, interactive research, and participatory action research. And all of this stems back for me to the idea of action research, which is perhaps the earliest thing that I traced in the textbook, as a practice which involves thinking about a commitment to change. So a change is the goal of the research, and that there is a potential to contribute to matters of concern for participants. And that is where in many debates about action research, it becomes tricky, because our job in the university is to produce knowledge. And knowledge is about coming up with research questions. And so the process of doing this kind of research is about managing the expectations of both sides to try and find a point of connection where you can produce knowledge that is both relevant and what we might say rigorous. And so there are long-standing debates in management research about how you manage that tension. It's difficult to resolve, and there is a frustration that sometimes what we do in the university is not really very relevant to practice. And so collaboration emerges as one way to try to overcome those tensions. And there is also an aspect of power that connects to the type of participants in the research process who are involved. And I think this very much speaks to the interests of this audience. It is a way of less powerful groups in society to gain voice. And so research becomes a way in which we can shine a light on things that we don't know about and people's experiences that are sometimes hidden from view. And this becomes powerful as well. But I would like to then kind of push along a bit with this distinction between the different kinds of knowledge that we can produce through these practices. Because producing knowledge is not a neutral process. It never can be. Instead, it's done in contexts which are defined by relationships of power and inequalities between those involved. And the distinction on this slide draws our attention to this by reflecting on the possibility that for both sides, the type of process can become quite instrumental. It can become a goal-directed exercise, which is underpinned by a concern with something that you want to address, whether it's the research question for the researchers or a practical problem in the organisation. And so when I've observed at MDU groups of managers from Hitachi come into the university for workshops to talk to researchers about how they can collaborate together to resolve problems that are of concern to them, it can be difficult to move away from the immediate short-term concerns of those managers towards some sort of broader sense of why this situation is emerging. And so in the action research frame, that can drive quite a short-termist approach to solving problems. And the way around this, according to Michael Burawoy, is for both parties to become more reflexive. And this is about saying that we all think of what we know from our own experience, which is situated in our own lives. And that situatedness is how we come to the table. And we need to reflect on that. We need to be reflexive about that. Otherwise, we just push our agenda and we're not sufficiently able to engage in that dialogue process. So reflexive producing of knowledge is about thinking about your underlying values that you bring to the dialogue about knowledge and thinking about the uses that the knowledge can be put to work for beyond the immediate problem. And this is where we get to a sense of ethics. Back to Linda.
Yes. What I could say is similar to what we saw in the literature review. There is an idea that collaborative research on MDU builds on reciprocity. What we see in our daily practices is however, that the collaborative process is quite linear and tend not to build on mutual benefits. To simplify it, we often have two scenarios. Scenario one, there is a financial pressure where researchers tend to engage in collaborative research only for the money, ending up in no academic output. One could say that academics become a consultant to the practice. At the other end, we have a scenario where researchers only engage in collaborative research to gain access to empirical material and data, ending up in no output for the practitioners. The last decade, I have done a lot of research in collaboration with stakeholders from the public sector, including several of Sweden's largest central agencies, regions and municipalities. To end up in one of the two scenarios is something that I and those I work with have tried to avoid by focusing on finding methods to better interact and focus on co-creating knowledge that is useful for all the involved stakeholders. One way of doing this is like we did with the Swedish Transport Administration, where we co-created useful knowledge in different workshops. Knowledge that came to use for the agency as well as for academia by scientific publications. The knowledge created was not only transferred by the academics into the agency's context, but practitioners from the agency also came to the university to present the results from their perspective and what they thought was valuable. What I have learned by doing collaborative research for a long period of time is that reciprocity needs time. Often several years, as reciprocity is built on trust, and trust takes time to build. And in several of the research projects that I have been part of has been of a length of 7 to 8 years that we have continued to work with each other to gain mutual benefits from the collaboration. What we can see from this slide is that the Swedish Education Act, as well as two of the largest founders of research in Sweden, Vinnova and the Swedish Research Council, all address the importance of reciprocity. This means that not only the management literature, as well as our university, that state the importance of reciprocity, but there is also stated as important on a national level of Sweden. What is challenging with reciprocity in relation to a national level is that there is a strong focus on delivering measurable results and outputs that have a short-term focus. As stated, to build reciprocity takes time. And there is a discussion on a national level that collaboration can't be easily measured. And if we want to say something about long-term outcome or impact in relation to public value, we need to focus on finding other ways to report the results on collaboration. And they are talking a lot about complementing the output and the results with narratives, but how that should be done and reported on is not any practice of yet.
In the final part of this presentation, we want to move on to digging deeper into the underlying values that potentially inform reciprocity in the collaborative research context. And for this, I turn to sort of some literature in the social sciences, which talks about the value of social sciences, specifically in contributing to a humanitarian future and creating societal good. So implied in this is a notion of ethics, an idea that social science research specifically is underpinned by moral sentiments about what the good society, what good ways of organising are, and that these have civilising and humanising effects. And so if we think of research in this way, and we think about those values as informing both parties and what they bring to the table, then it becomes more than simply the research outputs, the delivery of a kind of project that the funder wants on one side, and it becomes more than the short-term interests of the organisation in solving an immediate problem. And both parties then are concentrating on this idea of public value. And public value is a way of thinking about what we sometimes call wicked problems, about those really difficult, intractable issues that we face that cut across from aging to climate change as complex societal social problems that we need a wide range of stakeholders and types of knowledge in order to address. And so it's by having dialogues at that level that we can potentially see the value of the university and the value of research and knowledge that's created in the interests of social science as a way of improving the future for people and planet. And this relies on the practices of research as evidence-based observations, descriptions, and explanations. It's that training that researchers have in the university that brings them into the dialogue with something to offer. And it's about bringing those values in, but also distinguishing between values and evidence. It involves asking, who is the knowledge produced for? What ends is it directed towards? And what are the prospects for it to contribute public value? And so the final part of what we are exploring here, as Linda has referred to already, is an ethics of reciprocity. Now, reciprocity suggests that knowledge should not be an extractive process. It's not a case of going in, getting the data and getting out. As Linda has suggested, these are relationships that might last 7 or 8 years. And approaching it in that way gives time for that reciprocity to develop. It positions the researchers not simply as performing in the interests of getting grants and publishing papers and teaching students, but as moral agents who are accountable for building those mutually beneficial relationships. It emphasizes the importance of time in developing those partnerships. But there are still problems. There are still struggles and tensions about what counts as an even exchange in that relationship, whether it is enough that has been given in return in exchange for what has been received. And so from an ethical theory point of view, reciprocity is rather a tricky concept. And so collaboration can never be anything other than an ethical struggle, but it can be one that we approach reflexively. So Linda is now going to conclude with a couple of final thoughts.
Yes. As final thoughts, I would like to highlight that what we're talking about is that we need a better understanding of power relations, about stake, interest and motives, and ethics of collaborative research, both in theory and in practice. As academics, we need to become more reflexive of how we are affected by pressures of doing collaborative research and the ethical struggles of building reciprocity. We would also like to emphasize to encourage practitioners to reflect more on your experience of collaborative research with academia and how to build reciprocity. And as a final word, I would also like to say that public value is also a tricky concept. In that sense, public value is something collective that we are going to bring to the society, but it emerges in interaction on an individual level. So who got the decision on what is a public value or not is also an interesting power struggle that deserves to look at. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for the excellent presentation. How do I follow that? I have 2 pages of notes. I'm going to try and turn them into something. So you raised such a lot of issues in that presentation that I wouldn't be able to do justice to them all. So again, I'm going to come back to my experience. I did my PhD on collaboration, so I'm aware of the sort of the issues that Emma was talking about, the problems with language, the different sort of terms that are used, interagency, multi-agency, collaboration, integration, partnership, but also the way that certain terms can almost form a sort of capital within an environment. People start introducing certain words because they think it gives them sort of leverage in a certain policy environment. So I've seen that happen myself. Suddenly one word's old-fashioned and a new word comes in, and suddenly you're sort of out of date because you're not using the new word. So one of the things that the presentation made me think about is coming back to this issue about collaboration and reflexivity. I think collaboration's often sort of put forward as quite a technical exercise. It's sort of linked to issues to do with policy and strategy. And therefore, it seems to sometimes bind certain things that people can and can't do in collaboration. I was thinking back to Bob Hudson, who wrote an article many years ago, and as far as I remember, he sort of said, you know, why do people collaborate? Maybe they're forced to. You know, you must go to this partnership meeting. We want a piece of the cake. I think Emma spoke about wanting to get resources, or maybe people truly go and join in collaboration because they sort of generally have an altruistic perspective, you know, a pure ethos that leads them into the collaboration. So these are some issues that are worth thinking about. Another thing that the presentation got me thinking about a lot, and I sort of thought about this a lot as a practitioner and when I did my PhD, is that because collaboration between organisations of different types is often quite contractual, it lacks these spaces for reflexivity. So both in my research, and I've spoken to practitioners about this, that people don't have the opportunity to really learn about each other's values. Their values are some way sort of integrated into strategic outcomes and aims and objectives. And people don't really get to know each other. Perhaps the only way they get to know each other is sometimes in smaller networks and groupings, you know, to do with certain sort of power groupings within the wider collaboration on particular perspectives. So you possibly find different clusters of actors within a wider collaboration who are sort of linking more together. But how can one, and again, I'm not saying I've got the answer for this, but is it possible to get a space where everybody can collaborate equally and honestly and trustfully about their values, rather than being filtered through this technical lens? The other thing that really spoke to me about this presentation as well, is something I've thought about a lot myself, is about, I think people often think collaboration is about the end output or outcome. And as I've got sort of older and wiser, I often think that collaboration is actually the outcome in itself. That sometimes at the end of a collaboration, there may not be a tangible output, but the collaboration itself has in some way improved society in some way. So, for example, by involving disadvantaged people in the collaboration, one might in some way, or citizens, improve their own confidence about engaging with society. So at the end, you're not saying, here you go, here's a service for you, you can go and get the service. You've actually given them skills where they can maybe hold their head up a bit and actually talk in confidence in front of a group of people where they couldn't do that before. So those are the sort of things that came to me. I've probably gone totally off piste, but I think there is a relationship between some of the issues I've raised and the presentation, which I found really interesting, and we could be here all day on that. So thanks very much. I really enjoyed the presentation.
I'm back, obviously, because I have been in and out, but I'm back, and hopefully, I do a good service following what people have been saying. So I'm going to be talking about something slightly different insofar as I'm going to talk about a project where if there is any element of research, it is actually scholarship research, because it is researching the impact of an intervention which we are having, which is was alluded to earlier, which is the Black Leadership and Empowerment Program, which I'll be talking about a little bit in a while. In a way, again, bringing together the whole elements of collaboration this time around, involving voluntary sector organizations and academic institutions in the Open University, as well as corporate institutions. And it is at an early phase, so I don't have the results yet, but I'm very sure over time, when we meet again next year, I might be better prepared to share what it is I've learned during the intervention. So for those people who don't know a lot about me, which is fine, I come from a place in Africa where we have got a worldview which we call Ubuntu. And I thought I should start at home, because obviously it's very important for me, because whatever I do, it's also related to who I am. So what I do is an embodiment of what I'm talking about. If it is a collaboration, it's not just something which is an academic concept. It is something which I was brought up to work and live with. So all I'm doing is just, implementing some of the things which I have been taught from a very early age. As you can see on the screen, those who are, either in the room or online, I am starting with a quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, which goes like this: "People bring together. Bringing people together is what I call Ubuntu, which means I am because we are." In fact, there is a sort of a hyphen. We are because I am. So the two of them go together, i.e. the I and the we are combined to make an ensemble, as opposed to just being I, because I know we live in societies where we are just looking after ourselves. And far too often, people think of themselves as just individuals separated from one another, whereas you are connected, and what you do affects the whole world. When you do well, it spreads out, and it is for the whole of humanity. So I think that's probably a quote which captures what we are talking about today, which is collaboration. So just to set the scene, this work I'm talking about began with two sort of social transformations, for better or worse. The first one was actually COVID. I don't know how we felt. Sometimes today we are in May, maybe around March or April 2020. If you happen to be sort of Black like myself, and then you followed the newspapers and all the considerations about COVID, and how we were told, okay, so we probably had to hide too far away because we were lacking a bit of vitamin D, and that's why COVID was, getting rid of us, or making us more sick more than everybody else. But obviously, the rationale for what was happening at the time has been explained, and the explanation is slightly different from what was portrayed at the time. So I'm not going to read the stats on the screen, but suffice to say that in actual fact, it had all to do with the social inequalities. That's what was at heart as the differential impact of COVID on the various communities. At the same time, today we are on the 22nd. In 3 days, we'll be marking the death of George Floyd. And you recall that obviously the whole movement, which began in the United States, was appropriated and exported and came all the way here. But what was interesting was that in each and every place where Black Lives Matter protests took place, there were sort of local messages which underpinned what was happening in our streets. So it wasn't as if, we were just angry about what had happened in America. It's because what happened in America reminded us of what was happening over here. So on the slide, obviously, I have used one statistics, which is to do with, stop and search, for example, which means if you are a particular ethnicity in the UK, you are more likely than most to be stopped and searched. So people might be asking themselves, why am I mentioning both COVID and the sort of the Black Lives Matter protests? The reason why I'm mentioning them is because, in a way, there was a cultural shift between what had happened before and what was happening at the time. And I'm going to use two ways to explain what I'm talking about. Number one, I don't know if you recall, but those people who led the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, can't think of Milton Keynes, for example, they were led by somebody who was 18 years old, okay? But we had already existing Black and ethnic minority leadership. So why did it take an 18-year-old to say, okay, I'm going to take the lead, I'm going to organize, I'm tech savvy, I'm going to use technology to go and engage? So that's a question mark, and maybe you can ask her at some stage to come here and tell us why. I make an effort maybe in the next year or so to try to make it happen. At the same time, there were activities happening across town. I'm thinking of Milton Keynes or even worldwide, obviously, when the service providers themselves, I'm thinking of the police, the NHS, everybody was trying to get to engage effectively with ethnic minorities, or in fact, I use the term racial as minority because apparently there are so many connotations, whichever words we usually can't get them right. So everybody was trying to get to be seen to engage. I'm very sure I won't be spending time doing talking, but I'm very passionate now about the whole idea of allyship and how we engage and how the kind of collaboration we have between mainstream organizations and those racialized minorities. And at the time, I found myself being asked, drafted to go and join many advisory committees. Of course, I enjoy it, but what was amazing for me was nobody actually asked me my credentials. So the fact that I was Black and I was visible or accessible made me a de facto leader. And yet, I don't think I represent anybody apart from me and my experience, and maybe the few people I talked to, but obviously it was fine. So it was in this context that I convinced the Open University to invest in a piece of research, which we began in 2021. It is still ongoing. We have already started to make some noises around the whole idea of gatekeeping, allyship, hard to reach, but that's not subject of this talk here. What I'm talking about is those tensions between the then existing sort of voluntary sector networks set up by racialized minorities and the tensions they had with those new and emerging leaders, some of whom were involved in what is called direct action. We didn't do anything dramatic here in Milton Keynes, but I know in Bristol there was something dramatic when the statue of Colston was taken down. You'll be glad to know that there was a decision after a poll to take the statue in a museum, and I think that's where it belongs anyway. And I agree with the people who decided when they had a poll to take it to the museum. So it was in this context that we were contacted by a guy called Paul Cisse. He won't mind me mentioning him. So he said, maybe we need a new bespoke leadership development program. And obviously, why do we need it? We need it because we want to support people to make an impactful media interventions, be able to go and receive and get feedback, give feedback, make some comparing arguments, use interdisciplinarity and engage and make sure that obviously, they are being heard, and obviously they also don't take no for an answer if and when some people decide not to engage with them as much as they should. So it was a challenge for us. He came, said, we want to do it. And then I was drafted in with Owen Smorovich Jones, who has since left us. We had to come up with a solution. But not only that, we wanted to offer the course free of charge to the learners. So if you can imagine developing a program, the university is committed, we put in money, and when we finish, we have to go and sell the idea, get the money, and offer the program free of charge. So how did we do it then? How we did it will bring us back to collaboration. We were able to go and persuade two corporate partners, the Manchester Airport Group, as well as Auto Trader, to invest in the program. Investing in the program meant they put money up, which was used to sponsor the tuition fees of our learners, at the same time provide the resources we need for the work wrapped up around the project. But that wasn't enough, because as you can imagine, the Open University is based in Milton Keynes, in Cardiff, in Edinburgh, in Belfast. Eyes on the ground. And this is where the Prince Trust came on board. So they came on board as a community partner and enabled us to go and recruit members of the community who needed the training. And literally, that's how between the two corporate funders and the Prince's Trust, we were able to get the learners. We started with 18. So 6 are employees of the Manchester Airport Group, and then 12 are from the community recruited by the Prince through the Prince's Trust. I understand they may be changing names soon to become the King's Trust, but that's for another day. So that's what we did. So I'll tell you a little bit about the program, and then I'll talk about some of the things we have done jointly and in collaboration. So what the Black Leadership and Empowerment Program is, in effect, is a sort of 3 components which form a whole. The first component is obviously using our Open Learn resources. So I cannot speak highly of the resources we have on the Open Learn platform. We have got a lot of courses, level 1, level 2, undergraduate, level 3. We even have sort of postgraduate courses bespoke, which are available for free. I cannot speak highly of the platform. And what the learners are expected to do is to do 150 hours of free learning, which is available online. Everybody can do them. And as part of this package, we have developed 2 brand new leadership courses: Introducing Black Leadership and Advancing Black Leadership. The Introducing Black Leadership is about leadership, but more or less the theory, but which we try to adapt and and make sure there is a flavor, so that it represents the people whom we are trying to engage with. Because unfortunately, most of the literature was written by, if I'm okay to say it, by middle-class white men. And, so apologies if I'm offending anyone. But this time around, we are trying to make sure that everybody can see themselves as a leader, because we believe leadership is a sort of a verb. It's not a name. So it's not the person, it is what they do. So the sort of the Advancing Black Leadership, on the other hand, is looking at the practical things you can do to exercise your leadership, to practice your leadership. So those 2 courses are available, and then obviously on top of that, the learners are expected to do another 102 hours from a portfolio of courses we have in the business school. So, and I'd be happy to talk to people who want to hear more about it outside this room. The second component is obviously a credit-bearing sort of component where you consolidate your skills. Don't want to go into the jargon we use. We have all the modules at the Open University, they have names. So for anybody who wants to know, the name of the module is BXM 192, making your learning count at work. So, and then the third component is the networking opportunity we have, and then I'll be giving you some evidence as to how you do it. The way we do it is we are planning to meet with the learners every 2 months, bring in our community and corporate partners, and also inviting some motivational speakers to keep people going. And I'll give you some evidence to what I'm saying, but also have some sort of mentoring, which is more or less like speed dating. It's not formal, it is semi-informal, where you can go and get somebody and then you can talk about a particular theme of something you want to work on. So, I mean, and I tell you more. So in terms of the evidence, as you can see on the picture on the screen, this picture was taken on December 7th in Manchester, and I'm there, where we went actually to go and meet people who, some of whom eventually agreed to become community learners. So we went there, we told them what the program was about. We were hosted by the Prince's Trust, and the rest is history. And a number of those people on the screen accepted the invitation to join the group. And obviously, some of them, I think at least one of them, I did meet them in Manchester last week. So the program was launched on the 2nd of May. And as you can see on the picture, so we have got, if it is collaboration, so we have got Auto Trader, we have got Manchester Airport Group represented, the Prince Trust, and then inclusive companies, i.e. Paul Cisse, who contacted us at the very beginning. He was there just when you were opening up, when you were launching the program. And obviously, our former colleague, Owen Smorovic Jones, who is now at Durham. So we have actually a recording of the event. If anybody is interested, let me know, and then we send you the link. And obviously, if you join the CVSL mailing list, when we have our newsletter very soon, there'll be a link, and then you can go and access it. I'm not advertising, by the way. And then I'm nearing the end because obviously we want to get people to ask questions at the end. We don't want to just be speaking to ourselves. We have got a picture actually taken last week on Thursday. And as you can see, this bespoke room where we were, I was with my colleague from the development office, plus some of the learners, as well as some people from Auto Trader, from Manchester Airport Group, and from the Prince Trust. We were in Manchester last week when we had our first learning hub in person. And what you can see on the screen, you can see Tony Whelan, who is an alumni from the Open University. If you are looking for somebody who actually has been able to develop, started his experience as a footballer. I was one of the first Black players in Manchester United. Then played in different places. Went to America. He shared his story, and not only that, but alongside what he was doing when he finished his career because of an injury, he was working as more or less a social worker without necessarily the credentials of a social worker. He was hired because of his skills to engage with young people. And then eventually he started feeling he had some imposter syndrome. And that's how he ended up doing a degree at the Open University, finished, did a master's, and eventually did even a professional doctorate. So it's not where we are, it's the journey we go through. And he came and gave a motivational speech, and we have a few lined up, but obviously this is only closed. So you are not necessarily all invited to come and join us, but we have a lot of things planned for the academic year for the cohort who will be with us. And I'm conscious of the time. I want to finish with a quote. I started with Desmond Tutu, and I want to finish with one of my heroes. She's late Professor Wangari Maathai. For people who are familiar with Kenya, she set up the Green Belt movement. She was conscious of the fact that women were suffering a lot in terms of, if you are cooking, you need to go and fetch firewood. So she started a movement where she was getting people to go and plant trees. So instead of traveling miles to go and get firewood, you could actually grow your own trees and generate your own firewood and not having to travel a lot to go and get something to use for cooking. So, but her quotation is where, and we can work together for a better world with men and women of goodwill. Those who radiate the intrinsic goodness of humankind. To do so effectively, the world needs a global ethic with value which gives meaning to life experiences, and more than religious institutions and dogmas, sustain the non-material dimension of humanity. Mankind's or humankind's universal values of love, compassion, solidarity, caring, and tolerance should form the basis for this global ethic, which should permeate culture, politics, trade, religion, and philosophy. It should also permeate the extended family of the United Nations. Thank you very much.
Gosh, how do I follow that? That brought so many sort of thoughts to mind. Just as a sort of a public management sort of scholar, there's some things that really jumped out for me about this project. I think it's a fantastic project, the BLET project, and the focus on leadership. Leadership can be sort of very generic, so it's fantastic to see a bespoke project on Black leadership. But one of the things that really jumped out for me is the collaboration between the different sectors. In my world of public value and social value, there seems to be quite a sort of a silo working. So we have something called new public governance. And then we have scholars talking about public value being sort of the output of all sectors. But yet from where I stand, people working on research and scholarship in the area that Fidèle talk about often exclude the private sector. And so I personally found it quite refreshing that that focus was included. I used to work in the Department of Politics in my previous job, and people were very much in this sort of private, bad, public good sort of attitude. Very difficult to take it any further than that. And I just think this is so refreshing, is breaking down some of these collaborations, because we think we're doing sort of fantastic collaboration, but are we really just working in the same old silos with the same old groups? So I thought that was fantastic, Fidèle. The other thing I just wanted to raise, and when we're talking about some of these corporations like, was it Auto Trader and so on, there are some scholars who are actually working on public value and corporations. Timo Mainhardt at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland has written about these sort of issues, about how do corporations contribute public value to society. They're focused, like Nestle, for example, they're focused on, I know some criticism about Nestle and the insurance companies. Yeah, it's very rare from where I stand to see work where it looks at collaboration between sort of different types of sector and across the piece. So I thought that very much jumped out at me. I think that's all I've got to say, but it was a fantastic presentation, and good luck for the future. Thank you.